The Powers Project.
Dr. Brown, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for joining me today. It's a
Very
beautiful
welcome.
day here in Florida, at least in my section. I'm sure it is in your section as well.
Mine as well.
Yeah, nice
All
and hot,
right.
just like the way we like it, huh?
Absolutely.
So,
Ah,
um, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is that
mhm.
you're a clinical psychologist and you specialize in relationships. And if there's one
Yes.
thing I've noticed, you only have to be on Facebook for 2 minutes to realize people are having a really hard time with navigating relationships nowadays. Just
Hmm.
dating people has become such a minefield for people. They just don't know how to
Yes.
navigate through this anymore. They don't know how to talk to one another. So I wanted to have you on to talk about these challenges, especially these new challenges for younger people who, because of
Hmm.
social media and because of their phone and their, just texting back and forth, that they never actually speak to one another,
Right. Hmm.
and the challenges that brings for them to, as far as when it comes to dating. So
Hmm.
there's a whole list of things I want to talk to you about, and I really want to talk to you about your book because you're the author of a book called "Don't Date a Psycho." Don't be one. Don't date one. Yeah. Okay, that sounds easy enough.
Yes.
And yet, I ended up marrying one. So,
Yeah, well, so sometimes you think you know better, you'll do better, but not necessarily.
you know,
So,
I thought about this after reading your book somewhat, and I was perusing through it, and I thought, you would think that we'd go, oh, that's easy. I would never date a psycho because a psycho will show who they are. And I remember going, you know, I knew when I met my ex-wife, and I love her to death, and so I'm kind of joking about this, but
sure.
she was crazy, and, I, and I told her that. I go, in fact, when we started dating, the song came out by Fine Young Cannibals called "She Drives Me Crazy," and I told her that was our theme song. So, but I didn't realize back then that I saw this craziness about her, and I
Hmm.
didn't realize, look, even crazy people try to put their best foot forward when they're meeting someone. And so I go, so I thought, oh, there's a little crazy here. I can handle that. I didn't realize there was a whole lot of other crazy that was coming along with it that I didn't know about.
Absolutely.
And so I found your book, the title in particular, interesting, and I really wanted to talk about that today because again, it seems like, oh, that seems simple. I won't date a psycho, and yet many of us do.
Absolutely. And if we're not dating one, we might be their psycho kind of thing.
Right.
In the immortal words of one of our great philosophers, Chris Rock, he said that when you first meet somebody, you're not meeting them, you're meeting their representative
Right.
kind of thing. And I've had people, ask me, you know, uh, okay, so of course I wouldn't just date someone who's crazy but listen, anybody can hold something together for a while,
Right.
and they don't necessarily think that is crazy. They're playing the game, and everyone plays games. People often say, hey, listen, I'm sick of people playing games. I don't play games. Everyone does, but people don't tend to think of them as games, right?
Right.
If you go for a job interview, right, and they're asking you, it's like, so where do you see yourself in 5 years, and things like that. Um, the game is you say, well, I see myself growing with the company, sir, and I see myself contributing and bringing my talents and my skills. When the reality of it is like, listen, the only reason I'm here is because the last job didn't call me yet, and I got bills to pay. So you learn how to play the interview game, and whenever people don't do that well, it looks so odd to everyone. It's like, who in the world would say that in an interview? And it's all, that's crazy. It's like, so people don't always put forth, their honesty at first. People are just trying to connect and things like that. And so when people see certain things that they don't like, the natural inclination is to think, well, this isn't a big deal, and I can handle this, exactly as you said. and it's not the world, and they seem like they're a great person, otherwise. This is a level of things that I can handle, that I can deal with. And then we talk to ourselves, no one's perfect, I'm not perfect. So, this is just fine. And I think inherently we think that it'll pass, that this is just a temporary
Right.
thing, or I can deal with it, it'll pass. But a lot of times, though, one of the things I find interesting is when people think that the other person's going to change, right? When they think the other person's going to change, the only thing that really winds up changing is the calendar. People say, well, opposites attract. Not really. Opposites might attract, but they tend to annoy over
Right.
time. And the way it normally happens is like I'll have a couple sitting in front of me, and okay, whoever wants to start first, tell me what sir, tell me what you liked about your wife when you first met her, right? It's like, oh, she was wonderful. She's so smart, and she is so independent, and she has her own mind, and things like that. I'm like, okay, great. Now, what is it that you're having a problem with now? She doesn't listen to me. Every time I want to do something, she just wants to do something else. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. So, ma'am, what did you like about your husband when you first met him? Oh, he was the strong, silent type. He was just this heroic, uh, keen features, and just strong and masculine. And he was just, he was the strong, silent type. Okay, so what annoys you about him now? He doesn't talk to me. So it's like he just shuts down. He doesn't talk. So it's the same behavior, just over time it looks different. But
Right.
but people tend to think that things will change over time. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, because the interplay between people sometimes makes you want to be better, or want to be different, or modify some things. But there's some core things with people sometimes that simply don't change, because it's part of who they are, whether they recognize it or not.
Yeah, you make some very good points there. For instance, uh, what those things that we find attractive about that person, where we go, oh, that's cute. All of a sudden those things that used to be cute become annoying. They're no
Yes.
longer cute. So it's like,
Yes.
oh, he's the strong silent type. But then it's like, oh, now, well, he won't talk to me. Well, you like the fact that he was silent. Now you're upset that he won't talk. It's like,
Yes. Yeah. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? I've never been any different. And he's
right.
right. So
Right, exactly.
mhm.
Well, one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I've noticed about women is women think that they can change men. And then that when, like you said, as time goes on, the only thing that changes is the calendar, because the
Right.
man doesn't know that she's trying to change him. He thinks, oh, she's good with me. And she's thinking, oh,
Yeah.
I can make him better. And one of the
Yes.
things with men is I find that no matter how crazy the woman might be, that he goes, oh, I can handle that. He'll especially say, oh, I can handle that because she's hot. So
Yes.
that's their main things. Like, if she's hot, I can handle crazy.
Yeah. She's hot enough. And
Exactly.
it's amazing the things that people tie their hopes and their dreams to. Something that will almost surely change. It looks and wait. I mean, it's just just over time those things are going to change. But yeah, people think that stuff will, in terms of like women change. I had a couple once. Uh, she and the boyfriend had been together. I don't remember. I'll be generous and say a month, if that long. And she tried to change his religious preference.
Ooh, that's
She
a
expected him to convert. I'm like, wow, that's a big ask. That
yeah.
wasn't even an ask. She bought him the materials and
Oh,
presented it to them like, hi, study this.
yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, you know. And another one was a couple, an attractive couple, very attractive woman, young woman, and so the she didn't seem ashamed or embarrassed or uncomfortable with this when they were sitting in front of me telling me this, but um, uh, they're at a restaurant. The waiter comes up, and he's taking their order, and it was clear that the waiter was just infatuated with the woman, just gaga, over her and stuff like that. And the guy, boyfriend noticed and stuff. He wasn't threatened by it. It's just like, wow, it's like you have a fan, you know. And in all seriousness, with a straight face, she goes, "Well, you'll have to get used to that if you're dating a beautiful woman." Like, and he did exactly what you did. He and what I did at the time, he just laughed.
Right.
And then he realized he was serious. And I'm like, wow, you really think that? It's one thing that you thought it, but it's another thing that you said it
Right.
out loud to another person. And she saw it like nothing with that. And he just thought, well, that was like a quirky kind of thing. But she is beautiful and stuff. But okay, I'm really not that I'm a little shallow, but I'm not that shallow.
Right.
So I I'm sure I can deal with this. But all that was just a one example of how everything else was. So there was always that superficiality and stuff. And pretty soon, looking at her didn't hold that same magic
Right.
that it did. It's just like, you're the best looking person I want to leave. So it didn't compensate anymore. So it's just like, I'm really tired of looking at you because we have to interact.
So let's all right. So let's touch on that for just a moment. So for so many years, decades or more, and I know it's been so much more than that, but women have never been taught, or women haven't been appreciated for the things that they're able to do. So they were, it was looked upon like, um, how do you look? Can you bear children? Do you cook? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so women have come around in the past, in the recent decades, and discovered their own self-worth, and going, I'm valuable. And so
Mhm.
they look at themselves in a different light. But has it gone too far to where now they're kidding themselves, where they think, I see women all the time who think they're tens, and I go, I don't know what book you're a 10, but because they probably revised that book the last time I saw it, because and then again, I don't mean to, to break it down to just a person's looks, but these
Mhm.
women, I don't know what mirror they're looking in, and
Mhm.
I think they're fooling themselves. And on top of that, that saying that goes, if you're a 10 on the outside and you're a 2 on the inside, you're a 2. That's the way I
Mhm.
look at it. So when
Mhm.
women come out, even if you're good looking, and we've seen this before on shows like talk shows, where men come out and go, oh, every woman wants me, and all the women in the crowd go, boo, we don't want you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
kind of ego
Mhm.
turns men off, just as it would women, to say, oh, you
Mhm.
think you're that beautiful?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's one thing to think it, it's another thing to actually say it out loud, because I go, wow, you got some cojones on you to sit there and go, yeah, I'm beautiful. do,
Yeah.
do you think we've gone too far? I mean, or women have gone too far into believing, not just to have, not just to say I have self-worth, but to maybe over evaluate their own worth?
Yeah. I think that's what I think women and men have.
Right.
I think because sometimes when someone is deprived of something long enough, that when they get it, they kind of go, the pendulum swings all the way to the other side, you know
Right.
so it's like, well, somebody that's never really made much money in their life and they've never really had many material things, when they get money they just go nuts with it and stuff, as opposed to someone who is accustomed to things and has a more level head about things. That tends to be toward the middle. I mean, on a financial for a financial example of it, you hear stories all the time about people that win the lotto. They've had like normal money and now they have a super amount of money and they just go nuts. But in terms of with these kinds of things, it's that when there's certainly a line. There's probably more of a gap than it is a line, between feeling good about oneself and sort of being delusional about
Right.
oneself. And I've seen men and women just be that, because what it is basically an overcompensation. It's I think everyone absolutely should, and women in particular, because it's always been a male dominated society, and women have tended to be looked down upon or not valued as much. So in a lot of ways there's more to overcome, because there's just an artificial barrier there, simply based on gender. So, and with that artificial barrier comes a whole lot of beliefs, a whole lot of of different things that reinforce the barrier. So women have more to overcome. But I think once they break through that, sometimes some of them just kind of go like overboard, as with some men. I've seen guys who have never had a whole lot of self-esteem. They date a really attractive woman. Now that this really attractive woman is giving them some kind of attention and love and affection because they are attracted to who they are as a person, maybe whatever. Then some of these guys have gotten emboldened. Now they want to try to hit on everything moving.
Right.
It's like, wow, she's got attractive friends too. I wonder about this.
Right.
It's like they don't really know how to handle these other things. So now they're just kind of full of themselves. But it's sometimes it's just like the overcompensation, the pendulum is swung too far, and it goes from being a sense of self-worth to a sense of entitlement. You should give me this because really it's like with pretty much everything, it needs to be earned, you know and earning something is a process. Earning something takes time. You shouldn't just cast your eyes upon me and then give me everything that I want. You should not just look at the car that I drive and then now you're it's about relationship. It's about building it. So when people uh are now so far over to the other side and they think all of this about themselves, part of me when I hear this, like when I've heard it in therapy, it's just like, okay, it's like this. Most things in life essentially will boil down to two words: now what?
Mm.
Okay, so now you used to think of yourself as a 4, now you think of yourself as a 10. Now what? Wait, so now what are you going to do with that? Aside from somebody sitting here ogling you, what else are you going to do? What value does that bring to anything that you're doing? Okay, I'm a 10. What does that mean for your job? What does that mean for your relationship? What does that mean for anything? All right. So it's like a lot of people, men and women, tend to, when they think of themselves in that inflated sort of way, it turns out to be unrealistic, and it turns out to be just as superficial as how people viewed them when they saw themselves as a 4. If someone views you as a 4, they're looking at something superficial and not taking into account you as a human being.
Right.
So when they inflate their self-worth, it's usually inflated on some kind of you know um, artificial, arbitrary, superficial kind of scale. So now it's like, well, I'm hot, I'm a 10. Yeah, all right, what else you got?
Right.
you
Well,
know so yeah.
it's funny that you say that because all right, so let me make this point first. It's and again, you please correct me if you know that's not the
Mhm,
truth, but it's been my experience and my observation that any marginalized group that pendulum, as you said, is starts swinging and then it goes way too far and then there's pushback and then it starts coming back this way. And I see that with every marginalized group out there that that didn't have rights or didn't have
mhm,
certain powers, and they start
mhm.
getting some, and then all of a sudden they're like, all right, we got this is new, we're enjoying this, let's take this even further, and they go
Yes.
beyond where they should have gone. But again, society pushes back at some point and says, hey, that's too far. We see this, like right now, the trans community is going through this process,
Mhm,
I believe, where
mhm,
they were marginalized people, no one believed in them and who they were, and so now we see that society has gotten on board, said, hey, look, if you feel like you're a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, and you feel like you're truly a man or you feel like you're truly a woman, have at it. But then it starts pushing way too far, where now
mhm,
you have men, biological men, who say I'm a woman and competing against actual biological women and thinking that's okay, and it's not okay, because now your rights are trampling on the rights of other people, and
mhm,
that's when we've gone too far. um
mhm.
and you, as you said, both, and this happens with both men and women. It's not just a woman thing, it's an everyone thing, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I told people, I said, because there's been this thing going around where on YouTube you'll have guys who are who be out in public and interviewing women and going, because women are saying, well, this is what we want in a man, and so they'll say, okay, well, these are all the things you said you want in a man. He goes, but what do you bring to the table? And
Mhm,
invariably every one of those women will say, "I am the table." I, and I said, "Listen, anytime a woman tells you that she's the table, that means, excuse my French, but she's a broke ass bitch and she ain't got nothing to bring to the table. she
But an appetite, yeah. So,
you what you see is what I bring, and if
yeah,
and that's it.
yeah. Yes, you know, in the Psycho book, there's a part that I talk about that, and I've seen it more with women. Not saying that it's inherently uh, a trait of women, but I've seen it more in women because women tend to go to therapy more frequently than men do. You know, so I guess it's a skewed, you know, population that way. But I've heard more than a few women say, you know, well, these are the things that I want, and it's like this checklist, but it's not so much a list of things that in my heart of hearts that I adore and I love. It's a list of demands,
Yeah.
and they better have this and they better have that. Well, a number of years ago, I was doing some workshops with some African American. It tended to be women because you know they showed up to the workshop on relationships, and you know I invariably I would have someone at some point raise their hand. It's like yes, because my favorite part is you know the audience participation thing, and they're like, okay, where can I find a black king? I'm like, I don't know. It's probably that last guy you overlooked because he wasn't tall
Right.
enough, good looking
Exactly.
enough. He drove a
Right.
Chevy Vega or whatever, you know. And it's just like, you know, I want someone to treat me like a black queen. It's like, okay, when was the last time you treated someone like a king? It tends to be one directional. It's
Right.
unidirectional. You need to do this for me. I mean, hell, even if you go to a restaurant, you tip the server. I mean, so it's not completely one way,
Right.
you know. So, but it's like that list of demands, like you know, inherently you should give this to me. But when I've heard these women say this, right? And I'm like, well, what can they expect from you? Well, I'm a good person. Okay, yeah. Again, what else you got? It's
Right.
like, wait, there's a list of 12 things that this person has to meet. But one, you don't have some of these things. I want someone that's college educated. Okay, what college you graduate from?
Right.
MSU, the University of Making Shit Up. That's where you graduated from. It's like you're demanding an Ivy League education. You don't have a you know a degree from Tallahassee JUCO, and now all of a sudden you
Oh
know
my
you're the one to please. It's like how one sided is that? But these same women look put upon when I say, well, what are you bringing to the table? What can this guy readily expect from you? And then it's like, well, you know, I should be enough. Well, shouldn't he?
right. Exactly. Exactly. Why do they not get that? By the
I,
way, I'm
yeah,
stealing that MSU thing. That was a good.
I'm glad you like that. But
um,
it's yeah, I use it with a lot with my wife, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
do you find that women also do this nowadays? Because this is something I think there's a disconnect here. As you said, women have this list. You know, they must be this height, they must make this much money, they must be college, you know, educated, they must drive this type of car, blah blah, all the way down the list.
Mhm,
And what you find is a lot of these women have gone out, become college educated, got that six-figure job, and drives a certain car, and all that stuff.
mhm.
And
You see it too.
sorry about that. I don't know why this popped up, but okay.
That
Um,
happens.
and so they're doing all of these things, but and then they're upset when men aren't attracted to, because see, men don't look for those things. That's what women look for. And they
Mhm,
think, oh, well, since this is what I'm looking for, this must be what men are looking for. And men don't care. They're like,
mhm,
no, that's it. They have a whole different set of criteria, you know,
mhm.
as far as what they're looking for in a woman. So they can't get the men that they want because they don't understand what those men want. Do you find that to be true?
Yes, and a lot of it has to do with socialization. There's a book. It is called. It's written by a husband and wife team. The wife wrote one about men, and the husband wrote one about women. But it's really interesting because I hadn't thought of it before. She was saying that when you she was talking about the concept of respect, right? that when women want respect, oh, excuse me, it's about love. Women's With women, it tends to be more emotional, which kind of makes sense, right? But with men, you show them love by showing them respect. So they interpret it differently. So it means something different to them. And I think, one of the things about that book, The Five Love Languages, is that it illuminates the point that not everybody sees the same value in the same things. So it's like I've in relationships I've had in the past, my personal relationships, when there's been tension and conflict and like a disconnect with things, I have said on more than one occasion, give me what I asked for, not what you think I need.
Mm,
It's like, I've never been more than 2 seconds away from any thought or feeling I've ever had in my life. So I have no problem, being able to convey what it is that I think and feel. But it's like, I think people are so socialized to not say exactly what they mean and to hedge and to, things like that, that when a lot of people speak, they think, well, they didn't really mean that. What they must have meant was this. And I always like to speak in terms of, there are no lines to read between. I meant exactly what I said, you
right.
know. So, that kind of things, and people miss it. And so when people are saying that this is what I value, and I assume everybody else, we as human beings tend to approach interactions, relationships, situations, thinking other people are going to react the same way. So when we are honest people, we tend to think, and value that honesty in others is going to happen. When
Right.
we're dishonest people, we think other people are going to cheat us. So we think people are going to respond to this situation the same way that we will, as opposed to trying to find out what the other person values. You know, so when women say, "Okay, these are the things that I've done. These are the things that I've accomplished. Look at how impressive that is." Yeah, it really might be impressive, but that's not necessarily the thing that I value. What I value is over here,
Right.
and and vice versa. Men are the same way. One of the things, like in terms of socialization, one of the things I found fascinating and horrifying all at the same time was I was talking with someone, it must have been probably 20 years ago. And this woman she was, I can't remember what she did for a living, but she was also in law school. And she had her own home. She's in law school, like a year or so from finishing up. And just very nice person, very decent person, all these things. And she was having a heck of a time finding guys that were, you know, uh, I don't know, open to her. It's not that she was unattractive or anything like that. So I'm just like, you? Because I value education and I value
Right.
ambition and I value all these things. So I could not understand why she was having a struggle, right? And she said, well, I'll give you an example. She said, I met this guy and, it was our first real interaction and everything. And we were talking and we are getting along pretty well. And he was asking me what I did, and I told him I'm in law school and all these things, and we're talking. So he just paused, and then he said, "Well, if you already graduated college, you're in law school, you have a good paying job, you have a house, you have a car. What do you need a man for?" And I was like, "He said what?" She said, "Yeah. Not only did he say it, he wasn't the only person I've met in the last year that said it."
Mm.
And I'm like, "That wait, that's intimidating to some guys."
Oh yeah.
Because in their mind their role is to provide for all of these things, when I think, listen, the more self-sufficient someone is, the better for them, for you, for the relationship, for the future, because you have a better chance of getting somebody when things invariably go wrong in a couple's life, in a person's life, that you got somebody strong to step up, that you actually have a partner, not just somebody hanging on, not a passenger,
Right.
you know
Exactly.
yeah. So but some guys are just really intimidated by that, you know and it was just like an amazing thing that um she was the loneliest high achieving woman I had at that time that I think I had met in a few years.
So, again, another great point. And I think that when you have men like like what she's speaking of, these men, suffer from insecurity. They're because they feel like I have to be the man, and I have to be
Hmm.
the leader, and I have to be the protector, the provider, and they don't take into consideration. And this is something I want to talk to you about as well. Is that as you know, I we talked to you before the show about the fact that I've created a course about loving yourself, and one of
Hmm.
the things I talk about, and that of importance when it comes to relationships, is that it's so important to set the proper dynamics in the beginning of that relationship. Like you said, no reading between the lines, just complete honesty. And that's, and I found, I'm like you, no one has to go, I wonder what Kurt thinks, because Kurt tells you all the time exactly what he's thinking.
Exactly.
And in fact, they get tired of me telling them. I go, the reason I repeat myself so much is because I don't want you to ever come to me and go, I didn't know you thought that. It's like,
Yeah, you did. You just didn't believe it.
exactly. I told you a million times, you know exactly what I think. But, um, but with that being said, um, it's when I find myself telling people like what you said, I don't want to take care of someone. I want a partner. I want somebody that we're a team. And I think too often men get wrapped up in this whole role that they think they have to play. And
Hmm.
so they go, I'm going to be the protector and I'm going to be the provider. You're going to be the little woman. You're going to take care of the house and you're going to take care of the kids and blah, blah, blah. So, and in particular, in our era and before us, those
Hmm.
relationships were normal. That's what everyone expected. So then
Hmm.
years later, when the man all of a sudden may lose his job because he's older, there's an influx of young people coming in, taking over the jobs because they're cheaper to hire, or the company is going out of business or whatever. All of a sudden, this man finds himself in a situation where he's jobless, and he's not able to take care of the family like he once did. The
Hmm.
woman has no expectations of her stepping up to the plate to say, hey, I'll help out, because she's doing what she said she was going to do.
Hmm.
You're not doing what you said you were going to do. And now, instead of coming together and working as a team, what you find is they divorce or they separate because there's this tension between them, because that was the dynamic they set up at the very beginning of their relationship. So
Hmm.
would you say, this is going to be a twofold question, because
Sure.
would you say that it's important to set that proper dynamic, to be honest, to say this is who I really am, this is what I'm looking for, and instead of just trying to put your best foot forward. And also, when you have someone like you or someone like me who's honest and says, look, this is what
Mhm.
I'm really looking for, and then that person goes, oh, that's what I'm looking for too, and then you only find out later on they're not really looking for that. So,
Yeah, yeah. A couple things about, or a two-part answer, I suppose, is one of the things that is a factor in how healthy, stable, strong, and durable a relationship is going to be between two people is role flexibility.
hmm,
Because relationships should be dynamic, not static. When I was growing up, I used to hear these, R&B songs, we have a 50-50 love. Our love is, 50-50 and all this and that. Well, that's kind of like scorekeeping. I did this for you, then you do this for me. It's transactional. And that tends to not do very well because it's easy for people to feel cheated. Well, I've done this two whole times, and then you only did it once, and you're mooching off me, all that stuff. It just invites other things. When it's transactional like that, relationships should be dynamic. It's not always going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30, 20-80, whatever, as long as it moves back and forth, because there are going to be some times when one simply has more of whatever it is to give to the other. Your partner has the flu, you don't. You mean to tell me you guys are equal at this point? No. It's like, please, can I have some soup? Of course, sweetheart, I will. So as long as it goes back and forth. When people are saying that, or when a couple has been together and then life happens and things like that, what happens then? If there's that rigidity in the roles, then it feels like, even if it's not the partner's fault that they lost their job or they got hurt or whatever, I've certainly seen some situations where the uninjured party feels cheated. Well, he should just get another job. Well,
Right.
if it was that easy, I'm pretty sure he would. The man got hit by a car. What are you going to do? You know? So it's like, so then it's like you see all of the flaws in a relationship at that point because there are no reserves. There's no flexibility. It just breaks. Whereas when I've seen relationships where there's an interdependence. One is not dependent on the other; they're dependent on each other. That's when you have true partnership. So when I've seen the role flexibility, when one falls down, the other can not only continue to do what they do, they can pitch in and do this other thing for a while until things balance out. So it's much easier to be able to survive a hit if you're flexible, as opposed to, you're just brittle and it just breaks in two. Now that was the answer to the first one. The
Right.
second one,
Yeah.
in terms of what the person says on the front end, dude, I think that's just like, kind of like luck, because some people are extremely convincing on the
Oh, yeah.
front end. Because here's the thing, typically on the front end, whatever it is that they're saying isn't being tested.
Right.
I'll be there, with you, honey, through thick and thin. Well, usually it's pretty thick, right there. Well, it doesn't take, a Nobel Prize winner to be with somebody while things are going great.
Right.
That's not a hard sell. You know what? It's like when you're in a situation where nobody will talk to you because everything about your life is just gone to pot. Look around you. Whoever you still see, that's it. Those are the people that are with you.
Right.
Fair weather friends is an old term that they used to use. And some people, they're going to be with you as long as things are okay, or as long as it doesn't cost them anything. The
Exactly.
second it costs them something, then you'll see the value of the relationship. This is too much for me to pay,
Right.
and I'm out. And the screwy thing about that too, I've also seen situations where a couple's together, they're together forever according to them, and I'm with you, baby, through thick and thin, according to that person and stuff. Something goes, way to the left, person leaves, right? The person that's making all these attestations about how loyal they are. When things balance out again for the person who was down, I am amazed the other person tries to come back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they come right back. And it's kind of crazy because now you have more data to work with. Now you have more information. Now on the front end, you were told by this person that they'll be there through thick and thin. When thin came up, and all you saw was the back of their head while they were leaving and stuff, right? And then when things got good for you again, now they're trying to come back. Now you have more information. Okay, and it's those two words again. Now what? Now are
Right.
you gonna let this person come back in? Now I'm not saying the first time something goes wrong and people break up, make up a lot, and stuff like that. It happens. It does. But not all situations are equal. Not all situations are the same. Some people will leave you just because it's costing them to stay. So, and then, oh baby, I knew you were going to get another job, and now I'm right back here. Well, the question then becomes, what are you going to do if something happens to this job? What are you
Right.
going to do? And more importantly, what is that person going to do? Because you stuck with it because you had to. They left because they could. So what are you going to do? you
Right.
know and it's more information to work with, and then maybe the two of you can discuss it and work it out and stuff like that. Probably the only real wrong thing to do in a situation like that is just, okay, I'm just happy you're back, and then not discuss what just happened. Yeah.
I don't know if I could trust that person again. I
Uh-huh.
think the trust would be destroyed at that point where I go, yeah, sorry, I just don't trust that you won't do this again. And sometimes it's not even about whether it costs them. It's about you can no longer provide them with the lifestyle that they become accustomed to. And they're
Hmm.
like, I'm out of here. I'm finding someone who can give me the lifestyle that I'm accustomed to. And since you can't do it anymore, sorry, Charlie, it's,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, if you get another job and can provide, and they're like, oh, I love you. I made such a mistake. Yeah, you did. It's like,
Yeah. Me too. Check it out. I'm not going to make another one by
right.
letting you back in the door. Yeah,
What?
and that's exactly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, good. No, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and you raised an excellent point about the key factor in any healthy, stable long-term relationship or short-term for that matter, but in any relationship. I used to ask people, it's like if I was doing a talk on relationships or whatever, it's like, okay, quick, which is more important in a relationship, love or trust? And a lot of people, it's instantly love, right? Because that's what you hear in songs and poetry and stuff.
Right.
And that's the knee-jerk reaction. And I'm like, with all due respect to the Beatles, love is not all you need,
Right.
right? So the more important thing is trust. Because you can trust somebody you don't love, but it's very, very hard to love somebody you don't trust. If you can only trust them while you're looking right at them, that's not a recipe for a good relationship. And you have to be able to trust what this person says, what they do, what they don't do, and if things change, can you rely on this person really to be there? And some people, I don't know, they just don't have a lot in terms of perseverance. In the cycle book, I used the metaphor of cups. Cups are just people's capacities for different things. Some people have a very deep loyalty cup. I mean, no matter what, hell or high water, that person is right there. They're ride or die. They are right there because their loyalty cup is deep. Some people have a loyalty thimble. The loyal, up to the point, it's not uncomfortable and it's not inconvenient and all this other stuff, and things like that. So one of the things is to recognize what cups do you have, and they're not all have the same depth to them. Sometimes you really have to be able to recognize, can I hang in there with somebody that's not doing well? And it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to do that. Um, and one of the ways, even if you don't have the self-reflection, kind of take an inventory. The last four people that I was with, what did they say about me? What was the annoying thing that they said about me? And probably that's the cup of yours that's not that deep.
Right.
You're selfish. Yeah, that might not be true the first time, but when you're hitting the double digits as far as how many people have told you that, you might want to look at it. you
Right.
know
You know,
so
you brought up loyalty, and to me, honesty and loyalty go together, and that is the most important thing to me. And I tell people that all the time. Loyalty is number one because, as you said, anyone can say, "Oh, I love you," but when I'd say, you know what, when you can show me loyalty, that shows me love.
hmm
It
hmm
truly does, and because I'm going to be as loyal as the day is long when it comes to you.
hmm
This is
hmm
why, I joke about it. I said, I have a small group of friends, and I mean very small, but these are people who I can trust, who I know are loyal to me, and I'm loyal to them. So
hmm
loyal to a fault that if they came to my house and said, "Kurt, let me in, the cops are after me," I'd go, "Hide."
We'll sort it out later.
We'll sort it out later. I'll just say, "Hey, nope, don't know the guy, you haven't seen him or anything, but then you and I are going to sit down and have a talk. But
Yeah.
I'm going to be there for you and have your back." And
hmm
then say, "Hey, we need to make the right choices here." So,
Exactly.
but I find that people who will often say, I'm loyal too." And the thing, I think, what I discovered was is something that we've been told our whole lives. Trust people's actions over their words. And one day it finally hit me, and I did that, and I was like, wow, it shows everything. I can there's a lyric from a song, an Eagles song, called "Take It to the Limit," and it said, the lyrics go, "If it all fell to pieces tomorrow, would you still be mine?" And I said,
hmm
when someone can answer that question properly, that's the person you want to be with. But
Absolutely.
even when I bring that line up to people in the past, I watch and see how they react to it. And I
hmm
can I can see in their face, like, yeah, I don't think so. And they don't even have to answer the question. I can see it, like, they're not going to be there.
No, not at all. Yeah, because it's easy to say and hard to do.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so I go by people's actions and not just their words. And if their actions and words aren't congruent,
hmm
I go, "Pfft, we're done." And I've
Yeah.
learned to trust my own instincts, because so often, especially, later on, as you learn these lessons, you start, even though you learn those lessons, you doubt yourself a little bit. This person will say, oh, please just, listen, give me a chance. I know that I messed up, whatever. And my
Mhm.
instincts are going, don't do it, because they're going to mess up again, because,
Yeah,
because they don't
yeah,
mean what they say. And every
yeah.
time I give them a chance, sure enough, they mess up. And I go, see, I should have just listened to myself.
Yeah, and and there's something to be said for giving people a chance. I mean, I certainly get that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like all or none kind of thinking all the time. Depends on the person now.
Right.
Now, there's some people because we haven't always gotten it right, the first time around, and then sometimes learning is a process and things like that. So I certainly understand that, but there are people that you pretty much know they're kind of sketchy at best,
Right.
you know, and it's just like this is not necessarily a good credit risk, So there's some people you can let hold your debit card, and some people you try to hide your wallet when they come over. It's like you wear it around your neck on a chain, So
Exactly.
I love you, but I don't trust you,
Right.
but yeah, and the ones that I think people kind of earn different chances. Some people you just know it's just lip service. They keep, oh, just one more time, and stuff, and they just have this track record of just stuff falling through for them. And and so those are the people. It's like, what? I'm sorry, but yeah, I can't do this. But as opposed to some people that you see that. I mean, they are just trying their damnedest to get it done, to get things together, honest to goodness efforts that even when stuff is against them, they haven't given up, they're still trying. Those are the people that, okay, you can afford another chance to. So if it falls through, it's not necessarily failing on their part, it's circumstances, it's timing, whatever. So those are the people you could probably, and those are going to be the people that disappoint you the least,
Right.
because they're going to see this opportunity that you granted them as gold, and they're not going to squander it, as opposed to the people they're just used to people.
Right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And again, you make another valuable point. It's like, this, it's good to give them that chance when you see that they're doing their best to do the things that they said they want to do, and be who they want to be, because you're going to mess up as well.
Mhm.
There's, and you want someone to be able, that you love, that you trust, that you're in a relationship with, to give you that same benefit of the doubt. And I think sometimes we tend to be very strict on that person, but when it comes to us, we're like, we want mercy. So
Yeah, we want more grace and mercy than we're willing to give.
right.
you know and what one of the things that I think uh it out of a lot of situations and a lot of behaviors in people and in relationships that I think one ought to look at is that with a lot of things like like in toxic relationships or just interactions or whatever, one of the things to look at as to whether or not you're going to give this person another chance, or whether or not you think this is a worthwhile endeavor, whatever it is, with the person, whatever, is to look at what they're doing. Like, okay, they say they want this and they're doing this. Is what they're doing effective in meeting the goal that they say they want to meet? I saw a couple from, well, I tried to see the couple. The husband wouldn't show up, but from my church, from a marriage ministry, and big guy, nice guy, super nice guy, and he wanted to be a football player in an NFL. I'm like, cool. In the meantime, though, never went to the gym,
Mm.
never did it. He watched a lot of football, but I mean, not one thing to go with what he's saying. I'm just like, now, I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not clairvoyant. My name is Karen, not Kreskin. So for the older folks who know who Kreskin is, the amazing Kreskin. But it's I can't predict the future, but I can make an educated guess about something. So a person who never bothers to get up off the couch, I mean, like ever, right? To be an elite athlete, I don't see it happening. Now, I'm not, it's the difference between what's possible and what's likely.
Right.
Now, I suppose it's possible if they change the criteria for going into the NFL. I'm a couch sitting, veteran or something. But but is what the person doing effective in where they say they want to go? And if it is, okay, great. So they just might need some help. But if somebody is there's they're what they're saying they want to do is to the right, but everything they're doing is to the left, or even worse, just not moving at all, it's not a safe bet
You know,
because they're likely to not use the resources that you want to give them.
right. So here, while you were saying that, this just popped in my head because something you said made me think of this. It's like, so it comes down to the fact that if you're not willing to support your partner, and mind you, support them meaning that, like you said, they're doing the things that need to be done that are effective to get to where they say they want to be.
Mhm.
If you're not willing to support them, then you're not a team. You're two individuals. And so,
Mhm.
when someone comes to you like that and says, hey, I want to play in the NFL and I think I could do it, and you say, hey, okay, let's do this. If this is what you really want, let's do this.
Mhm.
So what's the plan? And if he says, well, I need to start working out, going to the gym, I need to start running, practices, and maybe, getting connected with the local college, and seeing if I can go out there and run drills with them and things of that nature. And they're doing that, and you support them. Now you're a team.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to tell you, that support will mean the world to that person. So,
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I've seen some situations where um, the person genuinely is ready to do it and stuff, and they simply have somebody that's not supportive of them. And I always see it as sad because one, I still think the person's probably going to do well, but it would be so much better if they had that person who they live
right,
with, who they've married, who they're in a relationship with, actually be there for them. It would be a wonderful thing. It's not going to stop them from achieving their goal necessarily, but it would certainly help them to get there more comfortably. But I've tended to see though more the situation where there's a partner who really wants to be supportive, but the person that's saying all this stuff isn't making a lot of moves.
right.
But yeah, it would mean the world to them though if they were genuine and sincere about it, and then this person's like, you know what, I'm all over that. Let's go. It's wonderful.
And it encourages that person to be able to
Mhm.
do things in the future as well, because they know their partner has their back and supports them. And then when the time comes, if it ever comes, they'll be just as supportive to their partner, or they
Mhm.
should be. I mean,
Yeah.
because again, without that support, you're just two individuals. You don't really
Mhm.
have a relationship, as far as I'm concerned. You're two
Right.
individuals who live together, and you've made a certain agreements so that you can live under the same roof, but you're not a team, and that makes a big difference, at least in my
Absolutely.
my book.
Oh, it does. It does.
So, all right. So I'm kind of going all over the place here, but there's so many things I
No.
want to talk to you about. So, one of the things you said in your book is that psychos aren't born, they're made. Now,
Mhm.
I would tend to agree with you. However, we've seen instances where you have kids who grow up under the same environment, exact same
Mhm.
environment. And there's always this one
Yeah.
kid, no matter what you say or do, this kid is like rotten to the core. Like he's just
Yeah.
gonna,
Yeah.
he's the guy, that you got to worry about having matches and burning your house down while you're sleeping.
Absolutely.
As
Hey.
a kid,
Yeah.
or torturing little animals or bugs or things of that
Mhm.
nature. So, do you think that there is some genetics to it, or do you really think it's completely environmental, and that maybe that kid didn't get the attention he thought he should get where the other kids did, and things of that nature?
Right. Well, absolutely. Well, I want to make a distinction first. Is that in the book, relationship. When I say psycho, I do not mean any kind of personality disorders or mental health issue. I'm not making fun of anybody. It's just psycho as in terms of the way most people would. It's just like people that make their relationships unhealthy or they're in unhealthy relationships. So just like when somebody says somebody's nuts, they're not really making a diagnosis. They're just saying this person's
Okay.
nuts. When don't date psycho, I mean it that way.
Okay.
Now, in response to your question though, it's like yeah, they're like when you hear the term psychopath and you hear the term sociopath, right? It sounds like two different things. Really, they're those are two different personality disorders that are talking about the same thing, right? So, and what they're talking about is a person that essentially has no guilt, remorse, conscience about what they do. It's just all these things. They do what they want. They're they're antisocial. Now, most people I hear misuse that term. People, when they say that I don't like being around people, I'm a loner, I like being by myself, they say, well, I'm antisocial. No, you're asocial. Asocial means you don't want to be around people. Antisocial means you want to hurt people, or something like that. Anti meaning you're against
I
people,
said what I mean.
something like
I'm
that.
anti.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's that kind of thing. So and then like in the common or the popular media, popular entertainment stuff, when you hear psychopath, you think of Jason, or
Right. Yeah.
Hitchcock, and stuff like that. But really, psychopath, sociopath, they're talking about people that they just really don't have any compunction about doing whatever they want to do in life, and without restriction, and they think they should. Why did you scam those old people out of their money? They weren't smart enough to stop me, so I deserve to have it. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. And the reason, the difference in whether you label that a sociopath or a psychopath is how that person got to be that way, right? That they are that way, but depending on whichever label you want to use, it depends on how you think they got to be that way. Some people are just brought into this world like that, hardwired. They just are. It doesn't matter if they're brought up in an impoverished environment or ritzy environment or whatever. They are going to be this regardless, because that's just who they are as human beings.
Right.
But so that would be a psychopath. But a sociopath is, by virtue of things that have happened to them, by virtue of their environment, by virtue of things that they're taught, basically societal influences
Mm,
made them that way.
okay.
You know, so it's kind of like that. So and and in terms of just even the concept of conscience, right? Um, the what a conscience is, it's not just the conscience, it's the capacity for it, right? So when I was a kid, they used to have these things to get rid of flies and mosquitoes, these no pest strips. Used to hang them in this little cart, this sort of rectangular box, and it had a sticky strip in the
I
middle of it. You
remember
hang it
those.
up in the middle of the room, and then stuff would come onto it and stick and die.
Yep.
I kind of think of the capacity for conscience is like that. That there's something in the vast majority of people in the world that experiences love, teachings, faith, whatever. All of those things stick to it. And as they stick to it and grow, the person realizes, oh, I can love someone, they can love me. I shouldn't hurt people. Hurting people is bad. So they develop a conscience. So if they do something that transgresses against what they have absorbed like that, then they feel bad. They feel guilt. They feel regret. They feel remorse. Some people don't have that strip. Some people they're just kind of empty that way,
Right.
and they just kind of, are like that. What's interesting, just a little tidbit, where you find uh, the most psychopaths, at least this was true about 20 years ago, where you find the most psychopaths in one of three places, right? In prison,
Mm. Oh,
in a you're right,
go
in a
ahead.
cemetery, or very successful in business.
Okay. What about? Uh, okay, I'm going to say this only because I have a friend who's a psychologist as well. We've discussed this at some length. I would say, what would you say if I said police officers?
Interesting with that, because I was writing something the other day, actually about a police officer, and that kind of came up. It's situational sociopathy. you know, it's like genuine. Generally speaking, like some of the police officers I've known, or worked with, or evaluated, or whatever, they're just genuinely nice people. They just are. But sometimes they are called upon to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. It's like, with boxers, it's like, I'm not mad at you. Why would I want to hit you? Because in this ring, that's what you have to do.
Right.
Outside of here, we can go to dinner. But when we're in here, it's like that. But with police officers, it has to be the capacity to be able to do that sort of on demand. So some people will get a job like that, right? because they're looking for an arena in which they can just be themselves. Because some people want to have the authority, they want to have the power, they want to be able to aggress, they want to be able to intimidate, they want to be able to do that. But if they do that at Walmart, they're going to get fired. If they do that on the police force, they'll get a commendation, maybe.
Right.
You know, so some people will seek out a job like that that resonates with them. Other people's like, well, I just needed a job. This is interesting. I want to help people. So they'll do that. But when the time comes, then they'll do what they need to do. But after that time is over, they go back to being okay. you know.
Well, one of the things I found interesting is because he did evaluations for different police departments
Hmm.
in a particular county here in Florida, and
Hmm.
uh, and when he first started, he noticed that these police that the evaluation that he would do, their answers were so strikingly similar to those who were prisoners that
Yeah.
that he goes, they're like two peas in a pod.
Mhm.
In his it wasn't a commanding officer, it was his boss, whoever that might have been at the time. He goes, yes, he goes, I understand that. And he goes, and you have to overlook that or we'll never hire anybody. So
Yeah.
and so
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so I thought, I found that to be quite, because again, I know a lot of police officers. I used to be one myself in the military. My
Hmm.
brother was one, and I remember listening to my brother one time. He stole, he stole cable. So he saw this as a victimless crime. So he didn't
Yeah.
see anything wrong with it. But
Hmm.
when we saw these three kids smoking pot down on the beach, they acted like, oh my God, this is the biggest felony that happened in this town, So
A
it,
narco. Yeah.
right.
Okay. The
So
cartel is here. Yeah.
it was funny how we could justify our behavior towards others and pass judgment on them, but when but cops feel like, oh, these things that I do are okay, like,
Yeah.
and this is why we see this double standard where cops lie constantly on their
Hmm.
police reports and things and make things up about people, and this is why there's no trust with a lot of police departments across the country.
Yeah.
And because again, it's almost as if they're sociopathic, because they'll tell different stories and they're okay with it, because like you said, they get into this job that accommodate, that will give them accommodations for
Hmm.
doing the exact things that society says you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And and the thing is, it's like, if you're the accuser, right? If you're the accused for whatever it is, you're not, at that moment, you're not being accused. So there's a power differential, the
Mhm.
accuser versus the accused. There's a power differential. So I think with a lot of police officers and stuff, or with excuse me, with a lot of people who are police officers who are in it for the wrong reasons, in terms of, I want to have power over people. You see this badge, I can do whatever I want to do, and there's something wrong with that person, just basically, because they're it's like they're given license to kind of do whatever they want, because I can't get in trouble for it because I'm the authority.
Right.
Who's going to believe? Is your word against mine? Who's going to believe you? I'm a police officer. Your job is to lie. My job is to uphold the law and all this other stuff. So they have more credibility and authority based on not who they are as people, but the position that they hold. So in their role, their job is to enforce the law. People aren't necessarily thinking at that moment that they're breaking it.
Right.
But it's like they have a certain insulation from consequences that citizens or civilians don't have. And some people just really abuse the hell out of that.
Right. Yeah, and it's important that we make note that it's not all police officers, but
Oh,
there,
no, no.
unfortunately, there's a great many, and they've been getting away with it forever and ever. And only recently has it been brought to light. Because
Hmm.
there's one thing that frustrates me is when people who don't have any experience in this area at all, who will speak
Hmm.
up, they'll say something stupid like, well, if you don't want to get arrested, don't commit a crime. It's like, well, it's not quite that,
Not that
cut and
right.
dry. It's like, you could be driving down the road and all of a sudden, be tased and handcuffed just simply
Yeah.
because because you didn't answer the police officer the way they thought you should answer them or something. And so you're right, we do see that.
Yeah.
I
What's I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, no, about that, about not having to do anything wrong in order to get in trouble. I had this really bizarre experience and it really rattled me, you know. and this happened probably about 20 years ago. And I just how much different events can affect a person, and sometimes you don't really notice how much it's affected you until a situation comes up. So I was in North Miami with a friend of mine. We were shopping, and we were in Macy's. So in this this part of Macy's that we were in, it was the men's department. So you got all these men's clothes over here. As you walk sort of like to the left, there's an exit or entrance or whatever to the mall. There's a passage to the rest of the mall. And then on the other side of that, if you keep going, there's the rest of it, right? So the rest of the store. So my friend was accompanying me while I was shopping. So she had some of my clothes, I had some of my clothes and stuff like that. So she's walking past where the entrance is to the other side, right? And so I'm walking and I stopped, and she kept walking. And then she noticed I wasn't next to her anymore. She's like, "Why did you stop?" I said, "Well, I have to pay for this over here." And she said, "No, you don't. We're not finished shopping yet. Come on." I'm like, "No, no, no. We have to pay for this. I have to pay for this right here, and then I'll go."
Right.
She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I need to pay for it. They need to put it in a bag." And she's like, "Why?" I said, "Because they're going to think I stole it." This is 20 years ago. I've been a psychologist almost 30. I was a grown man, a doctor, and it was almost like there was a wall there that I could not pass. She had to grab me by my hand and take me to the other side. And it's like, okay, no alarms, the SWAT team didn't drop down from the ceiling and all this other stuff. And I bet nobody batted an eye. So it's just normal stuff. I didn't realize how much, like growing up in South Florida, and how many times I had been exposed to people not being in law enforcement for the right reasons.
Right.
Just screwing with people because they could, and all this other stuff. I never realized so much of that was internalized until I tried to walk across an entrance to go get some more shirts. It's amazing. But when people are in, it's, I guess it's kind of like with anything. When you are, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a job, a profession, whatever, however you are with other people impacts them, whether you see it or not, or whether they know it or not. So
Right.
there are people, Kurt, that you have interacted with, that you have said something to, whatever, who are, as we speak, are talking to one of their friends, telling a story about, yeah, I met this guy Kurt one time, and he said this,
You
and I
think
really felt better. You know, yeah, but it's like that though. But it's like, so at times when we don't feel very powerful, when we don't feel very impactful, understand we are. That's why it's important that we love ourselves. So out of our dislike for ourselves, we don't say something that hurts somebody else. Because when we love ourselves, to go back to your original point, when we love ourselves and we feel good, we can say something that helps somebody else love themselves too. So
absolutely. That was a nice segue, by the way. I like
thank you. Try to work my way back around.
um and you're absolutely right. One of the things that I talk about in loving yourself is that you find yourself not being as judgmental, not being as angry, not being as fearful. I mean, all these things have just sort of, I don't want to say they completely disappear, because there's always times that are going to come about where we're not happy, especially like the loss of a loved one or something. We can be as happy as we can make ourselves, but the fact is we're going to be sad because we lost someone who we love dearly. So loving yourself doesn't guarantee that you're going to be happy from now to the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have fear. It doesn't mean you're not going to have anger. It does, because sometimes I like to call it righteous anger. Someone does something that's worthy of you being angry at
Being
them,
angry,
and
absolutely.
it's okay.
Hmm.
But to get angry over silly little stuff that
Hmm.
like that you get angry about now, when you love yourself, all of a sudden those things just go, they're not worth it. They're
Yeah,
just not worth
yeah.
your time.
Yeah, you're more accepting because you're more accepting of yourself, and then you think,
Right.
well, this person might be going through the same thing. So it kind of diminishes some of a person's judgmentalness, if they've matured into it. It
Right.
does. And yeah, so it helps if you're more accepting of yourself. You tend to be more accepting of other people as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, so as these things dissipate, fear, anger, judgment and all that, those other things, as you just said, grow, empathy,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
compassion and kindness.
Absolutely.
Those things tend to get stronger. So when
Hmm.
you love yourself. So and that's why, again, I'll state this from the beginning. I truly believe that loving yourself is the most important thing you can do in life. It's the number one thing you should focus on, because it is the foundation of everything else that goes on in your life. It's just that important. And I don't know that people understand that, because we live in a country where, and in a world now where people just don't love themselves. And you can tell by their actions, because they're mad at the world.
Yeah.
They're victims of everything. The world is doing this to them rather than for them. And so
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
whole mindset. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
The more you love yourself, the more it opens up space for other things in your life, good things in your life.
okay. So all right. So Doc, let's talk about something else that you talked about in your book, which I was fascinated by, because I haven't heard anyone talk about this. And I mean, maybe in passing, because again, I do have friends who are psychologists, and so they might have mentioned it, but never went into detail about it. But you sort of did in your book when you talked about emotional hoarders, and I thought, wow, I really didn't consider, but it's like you make the comparison to people who hoard physical things in their home, and their
Mhm.
home becomes so cluttered that you can't find anything. I mean, it might
Yeah.
make that one person, but there's so much stuff in there that there's hardly any room to put anything else in there. And so I wanted to ask you, when you have emotional hoarders, and I'll let you describe what that is, as far as what that means, when they clutter their brain with so much emotion, it
Mhm.
doesn't leave any room for any real growth or change or anything. Would that be right?
Yes, that would be exactly right. It's like, when you see these TV shows or documentaries or whatever about hoarders, it's just so uncomfortable to watch. It's like all this stuff is it's like they have a house worth of stuff in a studio apartment kind of thing. Everything is concentrated and stacked on top of each other. It's like you can't move
Right.
because there's so much stuff that's around and things like that. And that's kind of how it is with people in their lives and in their relationships as well. If by hoarding, they've not had their experiences, let's say, whether it's with family, friends, previous relationships, with themselves or whatever. Whereas most people will take that experience or whatever, and they process it, they enjoy it or whatever, and then they either discard it or get rid of it or take a piece of it or something like a memento or souvenir or whatever. But then they're just ready for the next thing. Emotional hoarders tend to accumulate everything and get rid of nothing. So it's like if you took a biological example of that, of your body, and you never went to the bathroom, you would die because there's so many toxins.
Right.
Nobody's saying you shouldn't eat. You should eat, but after everything's been processed, and not to be crass, it needs to go.
Right.
You need to go. It needs to go. Stuff like that. So now you can be hungry again. For people who never get rid of an old relationship, who never get, you would think that relationship ended yesterday
Mm.
to hear him talk. That thing was like 32 years ago, you know? And I'm like, wait, you're talking like you're expecting this guy to call like in a minute. But
Right.
no, that was 30 something years ago. Like, why are you still thinking about that? And but I've seen it with lots of people will hold on to things. They never get rid of anything. And when you look at these shows about hoarders or whatever, it's not new stuff. Certainly not exclusively.
Right.
It was new at one point, but it's just been here forever. It doesn't serve any purpose, doesn't serve any function, right? So they can't, they don't have room for anything new because they won't throw anything away. So here's the thing with a lot of people, with a lot of things, right? Whether or not what they're doing, how they see things, how they feel about things, whether or not it's dysfunctional, isn't an absolute. It's dysfunctional if there's no need for it anymore. If there was a need for it at one point in time, it was functional.
Right.
But if there's no more need for it, it's not. It's like when people use the term, well, you're just using such and such as a crutch. You're just using that as a crutch. In and of itself, a crutch isn't a bad thing. If you have a broken leg, you need a
Right.
crutch, right? Because you're in a bad way. You need a crutch, right? A crutch is only dysfunctional after your leg is healed and you're still hobbling around on it. A crutch is only dysfunctional and maladaptive if you've never broken your leg. It's like, oh, you see somebody sees me walking around because, Dr. Brown, oh, did you hurt your leg? Nah, no. I just felt like using my crutch today. I'd be nuts. You don't do stuff like that. But the thing with the emotional hoarders, their reactions to certain situations or relationships, their feelings about them, the relationships or the experiences themselves or whatever, how they felt with them, how they dealt with them, at one point in time was probably functional. Okay, so my girlfriend broke up with me when I was, 16, and it really, really hurt. And that's genuine and that's real. So feeling betrayed or feeling hurt or feeling abandoned or feeling rejected, it makes absolute sense when that girl broke up with you when you were 16. The problem is you're 52 and you're still hurt by 16. Now, there are certain experiences, of course, that are so profound and so traumatic that 50 years later, it can still bother you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not to take anything away from that. But not every loss is trauma. Not every situation. They don't, not everything has the same weight. I've talked to people and I'm like looking at them, I'm like, okay, we really need to work on this. You know, like when Facebook first came out, right? And I'd be talking to people and they'd be like, yeah, I looked up Jeremy, you know, and I wrote him and, we're talking about stuff. I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking, Jeremy's, somebody that, she knows, somebody that, hadn't seen him in a while or something like that. This person's 40. Jeremy was in her 11th grade chemistry class, right? And hey man, I'm serious. They're dead serious about this. And I want to ask him, why didn't he ask me out? I'm like, to what? She's like, to the dance or the prom or whatever. I'm like, wait. You asked him now why he didn't ask you to the prom when you were in 11th grade? And it's like, yeah. I'm like, why? I mean, not to judge, I'm not judging,
Right.
but help me to understand it the way you understand it. Why is that an issue for you now? And she said, because if he had asked me out, I liked him. If he had asked me out, we'd have gone, we'd have had a good time, and things could have gone on. We could have gone to the same college. I mean, there is this whole, storyline and stuff, And I'm like, wow, okay, I don't know that it would have worked that way, but I see what she's attached to. I have another friend who followed her husband from like New York to Florida to she was in, I think, grad school or something in New York, and she followed her husband out of love and stuff like that. So we were talking. Now this was 30 years ago. We were talking, and she was still bitter about that decision to relocate. I'm like, well, why are you upset about it? And she said, because if I had stayed in New York, I would have gotten my master's, I would have gotten a nice place, I would have gotten a job, I would have, all of these things. And so I listened to her. I said, or you could have gotten hit by a bus.
Mm,
I don't know. But here's the important thing, neither do you.
right.
You don't know how that would have turned out. And when people think a particular way, their emotions tend to follow. So when they think I lost out on all of these things because of that thing, and they're still holding it, it's in a corner. You can't see it from here because there's so much other stuff on it. You know, if I had just had that, then all of these things would have happened. There are absolutely no guarantees, you know, but people will hold it and they'll pack it away and they'll put it over there. And they'll tend to do that same thing with a lot of different experiences, emotions, grudges. They do it with grudges as well.
So don't you think that behavior, all right, so that it stunts their growth as a person? I mean, because it seems to me when you're holding on to things, especially that old, and you don't have room, to put good thoughts in there, things
Yeah,
that are positive that have happened in your life, and you're still holding on to grudges and old things, old relationships that didn't work out that you're upset about because they should have worked out. I mean,
yeah.
does it stunt that person's growth? And how we let me tell you a really quick story. I have a girl who a woman who was a friend of mine, and we had met when we were like 15 or 16 years old, and she
Hmm.
always wanted to have a relationship with me, but she wasn't my type. She, there was like she was the girl who always had all the makeup on, her hair always had to be done just right. I was
Hmm.
the guy who liked girls who played softball, who just put
Yeah,
their
yeah,
hair up in a ponytail and they look beautiful.
yeah,
That's who I
yeah.
was into. More women who were more natural and didn't have to do a whole lot. And not that there's anything wrong with any women doing whatever it is that makes them feel well. It just that was what I was attracted to.
Hmm.
You know that over 40 years later, she had come to a seminar that I had done, and
Hmm.
we went out to lunch after the seminar, and she asked me, for over 40 years later, why did you never like me like that? And I go, what? I go,
Yeah,
you know,
because we were
why
children.
why are you still even like thinking like that? Like why would that even matter to you? But it did,
Yeah,
and she was dead serious. Like she wanted to know, why was I not attracted to her the way I was another girl that we both knew, and
yeah.
she just couldn't get past that. And I go, it's not like I'm Brad Pitt. Why would you care? It's like
Well, you were Brad Pitt to hurt. So,
barely.
but yeah, and and like when they ask the questions, like my initial reaction is to chuckle because I think they're kidding,
Right.
or or it's rhetorical or something like that. But no, they really pause and they're waiting for an answer. Yeah, and to answer your question, yeah, it really does stunt their sort of emotional growth and progress, because it's like if somebody keeps giving you items to hold, you can only hold so much
Right.
until you can't move, you can't walk, you can't see, because look, I can't hold on to anything else. So when people do this stuff, they never get rid of the old stuff so that they can get new stuff, right? So when they just pack it away and don't look at it, it's not like they're processing it. It's not like they're learning from it. They're just keeping it. It's like a bunch of books you've never read,
Right.
you know? And it's just like, yeah, that's fine for a library and stuff because, they're just reference materials, only take them out when I need them, but it's not my bread and butter either. So, people don't, that they just save them, they don't process them, they just keep them there. And then they just keep more stuff. And here's the thing, whatever, like, say if it was a rejection, or just not even a rejection, a non acceptance, or whatever, right? Because they've just held it and they've never processed it, when similar experiences have come up, all they do is they see it as the same. So I'm going to put this over in the R section under rejection, and I'm going to keep stocking that up. As opposed to learning to open it up, reading, it's like, oh, it really wasn't a rejection. I was out of town that week. So sometimes processing and understanding it doesn't take much.
Right.
But okay, now that I've read this, I don't need to read. I don't need to keep it anymore. I can just get rid of this. And then new things can come in. Otherwise, all you have is a humongous, cluttered collection of rejection and grudges and hurt and pain. People don't necessarily hoard wonderful experiences. Typically when people hold on to something for a long time, unless they're just actively in love with somebody over a long period of time, the things that people tend to hold on to like that, tend to be something negative, some kind of
Why,
hurt, some
so
kind of grudge.
why is that? Why do we hold on to the things that hurt us, the things that like will bring up anger out of us?
Yes.
Why do we hold on to that instead of the things that we could love and bring and have these wonderful feelings that come up out of us instead? And not to say
Right.
that we don't, because I think sometimes this is sort of a dichotomy, if you will. It's that because when you think about, like, you have thoughts in your head about good things that have happened, like trips that
Mhm.
you've taken and stuff, and those can pop up in your head and you go, oh, I remember those times. like you said, we don't tend to hoard anywhere near as many of those experiences as we do with all the bad. Is it because there's a lot more bad that happens to us than good, or is it just our perception or our mindset that causes that?
I think it's probably perception and mindset, and I think it's because the negative things that happen to us are probably more threatening.
Mm,
Because it's like it's like that you have a good friend, but you feel an enemy. It's like on a deeper level
right.
kind of thing in some ways, because the friend you just feel, because that's like the norm, that makes you feel good. The enemy or the foe or whatever, those are people that are possibly damaging. So it's like you have to be more active in terms of keeping an eye on that.
Right.
But in terms of holding on to like the negative, the painful things, the things that hurt us, it's like with grudges, right? In particular, and I see this a lot with relationships, whether the relationships are romantic or whether relationships are family. um, Something I see as a superpower, if people can do it, right? It's forgiveness.
Mm,
Now that might sound kind of weak and kind of just like, let's sing kumbaya and all that, but it is an incredibly powerful thing, forgiveness. Um, because I think people misunderstand and feel like they have the wrong take on it, or have a take on it that's not helpful. So typically, when people hold grudges, it's like, I feel that I was wronged by you. You did this, and it really could be legitimate, right? The hurt, or the offense, it could be actual, real. You hurt me with this, and I'm not going to forgive you for that, because you hurt me, and stuff like that. Even if the person says, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't know, or I did know and I'm still sorry, I'll do anything to make up for it. I'll never do it again. Please forgive me. And the person says, no, I'm not going to do it. So a couple things usually are usually going on with that. Sometimes when the push is for them to forgive the offender, to forgive the person that hurt them, right? One of the reasons they don't want to forgive them is because they equate forgiveness with what you did was okay. Like, I let you off the hook. So if I say I forgive you, then I'm being weak. So that's like, so you can just walk all over me. I'm a doormat, and it's like, no, you're just forgiving them for this one thing. And but people will take it like that. So I'm not going to forgive you because I'm not weak. So that's the one thing. The other thing about it is more tactical. Some people will not forgive another person because, as long as I don't forgive you, I have that power of
mm,
guilt over you.
right.
So no, I'm not going to forgive you. So I always have that in my back pocket. I can bring up, I can take it out, and it's like, see, remember this, remember when you did this to me.
Right.
And it can quash a whole series of arguments. Like, a couple 10 years ago, the guy or the girl did something, and legitimately the other one was ticked off about it. And now, he or she wants to bring something up now, and it's just like, oh yeah, of course, it's okay if you cancel out, just like you did in 1986. you
Now,
know
you said he or she, but I'm going to say it because I know it's going to sound misogynistic, but I'm going to say women do that stuff all the time to men, all the time. They're like elephants; they don't forget a damn thing.
For the record, you said that, Kurt.
I know that's why I said I'll take it because I know I know what you're thinking, though, Doc.
Amen. But it's yeah, but it's like, it's a way to maintain control and stuff. And it took me years, really, to personally and professionally, really, to get next to it. I was watching a sermon one time about Bishop T.D. Jakes, and he was saying, he said, when you forgive somebody, right, what you're doing is, like, you're breaking that hold, that emotional, that psychological hold that the situation or the hurt has over you. So once you do it, you're done. And this was the secret that I never heard anyone speak about, right? He said, when you first forgive somebody for something that they did that hurt you, you don't really feel like you forgave them, because you make the decision to forgive them. The
Right.
feelings typically aren't there yet. Now, see, all I had just thought, okay, then you're over it. It's like, no, it may take you a while for your feelings to catch up to your decision, because you may just, okay, I'm going to forgive you, but it's like, I'm still sore from that injury that you inflicted on me and stuff like that. He said, but once it's done, as long as you don't keep it alive by bringing it up and all this other stuff, it's done. So it doesn't have that grip on you anymore. That every time you think of it, you're devastated, or every time an anniversary comes up, or you see a movie or something on TV, that it doesn't trigger you. You know.
Right. All right. So
Mhm.
I want to take one step back because I want to address
Sure.
something that you said that again made something pop in my head, and I want to come back to this forgiveness thing. So you said, you were talking about, we were talking about why we hold on to those things that cause us anger and things of that nature, and you were talking about the fact that, a lot of times it's to protect ourselves, that we
Hmm.
don't let this stuff happen. So we remember these things so we can
Hmm.
go, yeah, we got to stay away from that. And I realized when you were talking about that, that's the job of the subconscious mind. The
Hmm.
subconscious mind, we have experiences that it holds on to in that programming going, yeah, don't trust this person, don't trust, like where it actually will get to a point where you go, don't trust anyone, because that's what
Hmm.
your subconscious your subconscious mind, its job is to protect you and keep you from harm. So
Hmm.
maybe that's why we hold on to those things more so than the pleasant thoughts that and experiences that we've had in our life. as far
Yeah.
as as far as forgiveness goes, I want to ask you this. Well, did you want to comment on that, what I just said? Did you?
Oh yeah, and I think that's true. It serves that protective function.
Right.
And something, because it's subconscious, we kind of do it automatically. We don't really think about it because we
Right.
don't automatically have that kind of access to it. But one of the things with it though is to be aware that that happens sometimes, but also to think that that's not an absolute either. Because rather than saying, okay, this happened to me and now I can't trust that. Okay, because there was a threat or there was damage or whatever, is to say, okay, um, it's to kind of learn from that feeling. It's just like, I just need to be more careful, because not all situations, somebody can do this a similar thing in your life that looks all the world like the thing that hurt you.
Hmm.
Like for example, I in an office one time, I had I come from lunch, and this is literal. There's a guy at my door. His accounting firm was like down a hall from my office. I come back from lunch. This guy's at my door and he's crying, like he's facing my door, my office door. There's no one there,
Right.
and he's crying. I'm like, hi. I've said two words to this guy coming up in the elevator. I don't. And can I talk to you? I'm like, apparently. Okay, yeah, come on. So we sit and talk, and there was some infidelity going on, from him and stuff, and his wife found out about it, and he was just crushed. So we talked for a little bit, and it wasn't like formal therapy. We just, kind of, he'd come to us, we just talk a little bit, right? So maybe two more times, like a week or so later, he comes. Now he's not crying, he's angry. And I'm like, what are you upset about? And he said, look, tax season is coming up. I got to work late. And I told my wife that I had to work late. And now she's all ticked off and she doesn't trust me. She keeps bringing this stuff up and all of that. This guy is just livid, right? And I'm listening to him. I let him get it out. I'm like, dude, you need to calm down, first of all, right? Understand, you spent up all your credit,
Right.
with the betrayal, right? So I said, well, let me ask you this before we go further. I said, when you were being unfaithful to your wife, did you ever tell her that you were working late? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So now that you actually have to work late, how's that not going to sound the same to her? So you have to understand, even though it's similar to what happened, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. So I say that to say that a lot of times, when we're trying to protect ourselves, or if our subconscious is serving to protect us, it's just to be to the degree that we can, is to be mindful that, okay, this looks like a similar situation, but it may not be the same. So I can keep an eye out, but I don't have to automatically throw it out. And that dynamic happens a lot with people who've been really hurt in a relationship. When they try something new, the second the new person does something they don't like, they cut it loose,
Right.
as opposed to allowing it to kind of you know
Right.
stabilize itself.
Exactly. And that's a good point. Um, what I wanted to say about forgiveness.
Mhm.
this is my personal belief, and this is what I tell people how I get through forgiveness. If someone comes to me for forgiveness, I tend, and I've always been this way, I will forgive them immediately. Now, unlike the pastor that you said, for me, it's not even a like I just go, sure, I mean, I go, they ask for forgiveness, I'll forgive them, and I feel like I truly have. But to me, forgiveness doesn't bother me if I don't forgive someone. Like they say, oh, it's not hurting them, it's hurting you. And I go, it doesn't hurt me, because here's the thing. I refuse to forgive somebody who doesn't take the time to ask me for forgiveness. I go, I'm not just going to forgive you for because that's what you're supposed to do. If you
Mhm.
don't if you don't care about my forgiveness and you don't want it, or it could care less about it, then why would I give it to you? So, but
Yeah.
what I tell people is that, but I don't forgive them, but I don't let them hold a place up here. I don't,
Mhm.
and I don't let them take up space in my mind. I'm done with
Mhm.
that person. I
Mhm.
have this thing because again, as I said, loyalty is a paramount to me, as far as you know a characteristic that you must have to even just be a friend of mine. So
Mhm.
when you're disloyal to me, you're dead to me. I mean, I'm just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
done. And then when
Yeah.
then someone will come up and go, Dr. Brown, I'll go, who's that?
Who? Doctor Who? No,
Doctor,
that's a show. Yeah, but
exactly.
yeah.
But and I just go, I don't believe that you have to forgive someone. I just believe that you can't let them take room up in your heart or in your head, and let them have space there. And so if you can do that, I don't think that again, this is my personal belief. I don't think you need to forgive them, because I think forgiveness is like respect. It's earned. and
Mhm.
uh and you don't just get a free pass, just because
Mhm.
I'm going to be a nice guy. So, well, how do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Well, I feel like, it's like, is like somebody does something, and the forgiveness doesn't really come up for it. I mean, it kind of depends on the person, the nature of things, the nature of the offense, the nature of the relationship, a whole lot of stuff. I mean, it's certainly better if they say, listen, I'm sorry that I did that, I didn't realize it, or I did and I was in a hurry, or whatever, but I'm really sorry. If they apologize, you know because the apology is an acknowledgement of your feelings, right? And then, so that's the first part of it. And then it's like, okay, okay, that really did bother me, but okay, I forgive you, even if they don't say forgive me. The acknowledgement of the feelings, the acknowledgement of the offense and how it affected you and your feelings. For me, that's enough. It's like, okay, they feel bad about it, and you know, so
Right.
yeah, okay, yeah, okay, no problem. Even if I don't use the words "I forgive you," unless they do. I tend to meet them at whatever language they're using. But it's like, okay, sometimes, still depending on who it is and the nature of things, I still kind of keep an eye on them and stuff, because I don't want to get sucker punched like
Right.
that again. But the adage is forgive and forget. One of the things that I find most personally and professionally is not so much forgive and forget, but forgive and change. So I forgive you for doing this thing, but now that you know that this thing bothers me, please don't do that again.
Right.
Because the first time, you could say, I didn't know that this thing bothered you. You can't say that again,
Right.
because I know that it does, because I told you. And I say what I mean, kind of thing. So but if the person just keeps doing and stuff like that, it's like either they, sometimes it's that they just expect you to keep forgiving them, or keep overlooking it, or keep dealing with it, or whatever, or they don't care enough to change. Or I mean, it could be a variety of things. But if the offense keeps happening despite the knowledge of how it impacts you, that's significant. You want to look at that, and you might want to do something different with that
Right.
interaction. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the important part. Don't just let them not take up space in your head or in your heart. Don't let them take space up in your life. Like, if
Yeah.
they're going to
Yeah.
repeat this and continue to hurt you, knowing
Yeah.
that it hurts you, why would you keep that person in your life? I don't get it. And the funny thing is that there was a couple, and they did something. They were friends of mine, and they betrayed me. And
Mhm.
and I was like, I really truly was shocked that these two people would do that. And And my best friend came to me one day, and he goes, "Are you ever going to forgive them?" And I go, "They've never asked me for forgiveness, you know." And I go, "So why would I?" And he goes, "Well, they think you make it very hard for them to come ask you for forgiveness." And I go, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I like, you know,
So anything else I can do for you?
right, exactly. Can I humble myself and bow down before you and ask you to please forgive me?" I mean, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" It's like
Yeah.
if you don't forgive, if you don't ask for forgiveness, regardless of how I behave or act or what I think, then
Mhm.
it's not real. So I don't want it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and and in that in that scenario, first of all, the arrogance with that is ridiculous. But the thing is, at least again, the acknowledgement of I did something that betrayed your trust, or I, what it impacted you in a negative way, to at least bring it up and say something about it. At least that's an acknowledgement of your feelings and stuff. But oh, well, you make it hard. Okay, so that's a prime example of blaming the victim.
Right,
It's like you hurt me, but I should go out of my way to make sure you feel okay because it really is about you and your feelings.
right,
So
exactly. So
yeah.
yeah, so I agree with you 100% with that. So
Mhm.
I know that we've it's almost, do you realize this is what I love about having guests like you on? Time just flies. It's been almost 2 hours since we started this.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I'd
Okay.
like to do, I want to have you back on the show. I definitely want to have you back on the show if you'll be
Sure.
willing to come back on the show. So what I'd like to do is, because I haven't even talked to you about toxic femininity yet, so that could be itself. So, but what I'd like to get back to is the emotional hoarding real quick, and
Mhm.
kind of wrap that up. And my question is to you: it seems to me that as people, and even in people our age, so we can't blame it on social media or
Mhm.
games or
Mhm.
things of that nature, but as we got older, there's parts of us that developed, but
Mhm.
where I can go, "Oh, that's a mature person, that's a mature person," except when it comes to emotional maturity. It seems
Mhm.
as though a lot of people were left back in junior high school, and their emotional maturity hasn't grown since they were in junior high school. They handle relationships the same way they handled them back in junior high school.
Mhm.
They handle conflict the same way they handled it back in junior high school. I
Mhm.
remember calling a guy out because he was just being rude, because we were in the store. He wasn't wearing his mask. He had it under his chin. And I go, "I don't think it works quite like that." I was just kind of like letting him know that's not
Yeah.
right, but trying to make
Mhm.
a joke of it. And he starts like yelling at the top of his lungs. Well, I know why he's yelling. He wants to cause a scene thinking that it's going to embarrass me, which he doesn't know me very well. So
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get embarrassed, but he wants to cause a scene and try to embarrass me. But I go, yeah. And then I was thinking while he's doing this, I was like, wow, he has the emotional maturity of a preteen, that lash
Yeah.
out, and this is how we handle conflict. And I find this also with people, and how they handle relationships. What do you think is the cause of this lack of emotional maturity in people today, and how do we take care, fix it, if you will?
Right. Well, with some of it, depending on the person, some of it's just a lack of capacity. I mean, some people they don't mature; they just get older,
Yeah.
right? And when you see a 40-year-old acting like they're 12, it's very obvious, that this person's immature. And not everything, I guess matures and evolves at the same rate. So sometimes, people's professional development skyrockets where their emotional development is stagnant. But a lot of times people will tend to be around other people who are at that same level. So you'll see a group of these people,
Mm.
and talk about the blind leading the blind. I mean, because they're all at the same level doing the same ridiculous stuff. I real quick, I had a friend a number of years ago who was with this immature guy, and this guy was like 40. They had two kids together. This guy was 40, and she just wanted him to do something that was just reasonable. I mean, in relation to the kids, and he's just very argumentative. They're on the phone and stuff, and we were getting me, her, and another friend were getting ready to go to the movies and stuff, and we were running late, and she's arguing with this fool, and all this stuff's going on and stuff, and so she's telling me why they're arguing, and I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. She's like, yeah, I know, and then she hangs up. And he calls back, and she embroils herself in this argument again. So I tell her, I said, "Would you like some help with that?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right." I said, "So the next time he calls, as soon as he does, I want you to hang up, right? As soon as he starts screaming, I want you to hang up." She said, "But I don't, no, just listen to me. Hang up as soon as he does it." So he calls back in like 30 seconds. Ah, hang up, right? Like what? And then he calls back and I can't believe it. Hang up. So this happens about 4 or 5 more times, right? So finally, when he calls again, he's like, "Listen, I'm okay. I'm not going to yell. I just want to know." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah,
He said, "How did you know that was going to work?" I said, "But think about it." I said, "He wanted to be heard. If you change the dynamic where you're not going to listen to him as long as he's communicating this way, the need that he has to communicate didn't go away. He still needs to get it out, but he just has to do it this way so that you'll hear him, because it was driving him nuts to not be able to say what was going on with him. You
right,
know, so that's how you handle it. You manage your reception of it. You manage the situation. You manage whether or not they're going to be allowed to do what they want to do. So that's how you kind of manage the behavior. Now, in terms of people maturing, it's people tend some people, if they don't have like a large capacity to grow, they'll just stick with whatever worked, and then they'll be around people with whom that has worked. Like
right,
the example that I started out with, talking about the very attractive young lady that says, you got to get used to that if you're going to be dating a beautiful woman. Here's the thing: she had nothing else to offer. I mean, not as a human being, but
right,
it's like, because she's never had to develop beyond that. So she was shallow in that way because shallow worked. So and people will change partners a lot of times before they change behavior. So some people will just continue to do their stuff until the person they're with gets sick of them, and then they'll go on to the next person who's not sick of them yet. And then that's when you find people with 42 different relationships and stuff. But when sometimes if people don't have an interest in growing, they will just do they will be up to the level of their own discomfort. So they'll stick with what works. So when you find like this guy, I will bet you money, has yelled and screamed his way through life, and people either back down, get uncomfortable, and leave, or that they'll do whatever. But he probably hasn't had to do anything more than that.
right.
So it's just like, and some people, they're fine with that. I would lose my mind if this is as deep as I'm going to be for the rest of my life. That's like a prison sentence to me. But some people, they're good with it because they don't have to try very hard to be any better.
Right. They don't, because of, for whatever reason, I notice like pretty people or beautiful people, they don't have to try as hard. So they don't. And so their growth is stunted because there's no need, because people will put up with their nonsense, and so we could talk about, again, there's so many more topics I want to talk about, like, the
Absolutely.
damage that, people who, men who we call simps, the
Mhm.
damage that they cause to the male and female relationship,
Mhm.
and the effect that they have on those relationships, and things of that nature, and like I said, toxic femininity and all this, so I could even talk about this emotional maturity, for another good half hour at least with you. So but before I end up taking you into another new hour, we'll hold off on those, and
Okay.
when you come back, we'll touch on those subjects. So before we go, tell people where they can find you, where they can find your book, and how they can reach you.
Okay. I believe I'm still on Facebook. I believe I'm not on Facebook very often, but I have I think yeah, I got like a Facebook page. I
Okay.
think that I'm not real sure what it is, but if you just look up my name, I'm sure it'll come up, Dr.
Well,
Keiron Brown. And then on Amazon and other booksellers, there's my name, Dr. Keiron Brown. It's Don't Date a Psycho, Don't Be One, Don't Date One. That's the main text. Then there's sort of a workbook that goes along with that, that kind of follows along in the different chapters. And then there's a book of personality quizzes along the lines of Don't Date a Psycho as well. So they kind of see where you're, they're relatively short quizzes to kind of tell you some different things about your personality and then how that works in relationships. So those three books.
Okay, and for all the listeners and viewers, as always, I'll have all Dr. Brown's links listed below, so you can click on those and find them relatively easy. Okay, so but listen, Dr. Brown, what a joy, and you dropped a lot of info for us today, and I mean really pertinent info. So I really appreciate you being on the show and joining me. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad and thank you for having me. I had a ball, so it's that it was great. Thank you very very much, and I'd love to come back.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Well, folks, listen, that's going to be our show. We're running short. So, anyway, take care, be safe, and remember, love yourself so you can love others. Peace.